afternoon, everyone. This is Smriti, also called as Smriti Kirubanandan. I serve Innovaccer as a managing director. We often think about, what it takes to be a physician who's searching across multiple systems before seeing a patient. A call center agent has 6 applications open just to answer a simple question. And the process is really tedious, which all of you understand as CIOs in the industry. And healthcare doesn't have a data shortage, is what we truly believe in. It has a context shortage. And today's call is truly about that. And that's where we have incredible panelists across the board from here, driving change and transformation, sitting the seat of CIOs. So we'd love to hear their intros. Ravi, maybe if I can start with you, and what are your role at Capital Health? That'd be great to hear.
Nice to be here. I'm Ravi Koganti. I'm CIO for Capital Health, and we are a community health system in Central Jersey, serving Princeton and Trenton areas. And excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ravi. Mike, it'll be great to have your introduction.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, wrong button. Hi, Mike Sutten. I'm the CIO here at Innovaccer. My role is helping our customers and prospects architect their environments to take the most advantage of certainly the Innovaccer product and data and the AI capabilities that are evolving. I'm a self-described career data nerd. I've had CIO and CTO roles at places like Kaiser Permanente, the Central Intelligence Agency, worked for a cruise line. I was their CIO, and even was CTO for a large oil company at one point. One thing in common is they all use data to fuel their enterprises. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me, Smriti.
Perfect conversation. Kalyani?
Hi, I'm Kalyani Gopalan. I'm the Executive Director of Analytics at Presbyterian Healthcare Services. My team and my role is on advanced analytics using all types of data, both payer and provider data, to enhance decision support and decision making. So largely business intelligence, advanced analytics, population health, and such type of analyses, strategic decision support type. I am here. Sorry, I was going to say I'm here as the user of advanced as AI. And I know you said, Mike, you're the data nerd. I am the supplier of data for the data nerds, so that you're able to use the data and make the decisions that you need.
Awesome. Love that. Kalyani, I'm going to start with you, actually, doing a little bit of a round robin over here. Where do you see there's a line between analytics that informs the decision and then AI that takes action from your seat?
That's a really, you start with a great question. And I think this is where we are. We are at that inflection point right now in healthcare. We've had the agents that are performing the tasks that the decision makers were suggesting. Until now, we had the analytics, the business intelligence, we had the machine learning predictive models. We had developed all of the intelligence for which you need to make the decision, and now finally technology is able to catch up with that group and say, we can then take your intelligence and really make the decisions happen, and use the agents to enable the action for those. So I really think we're at that inflection point, and we're seeing that in operationalization of models, in enhancing the delivery of advanced analytics into the systems, in being able to digest and understand it with chatbots, for example, where we used to be able to send PowerPoints. Now we can send a file where somebody can use a Copilot or a ChatGPT to be able to understand and learn more about the information in it. So I think it's a great point we're in. Ask me in about a year or two, and I'll tell you how well we've done. But we're at that precipice right now.
Yeah, I'm going to put a calendar note on that one for sure. Ravi, would love your intel on, from your seat, where is Capital Health on their AI journey? And then where do you think generally healthcare organizations are today on that path as well?
So it's good timing for when we started our data journey. I've been here 4.5 years, but we really did not have a very solid, comprehensive data strategy. So 1.5 year ago, we started the journey trying to connect all the data sources that we have, which we have a variety of them. But we also have two EHRs, which is unlike of in this current era. But we do have ambulatory and inpatient EHR. So we started the population journey of connecting the data. But what we stumbled into it, there's so much low-hanging fruit beyond the complexity of longitudinal of care. So we started feeding more and more data. The beauty was really when whole AI became more mainstream, and we knew how the foundation of the data is so important. So we are at a stage now. We truly want to use the data and operationalize AI in very small places. So we used AI in the beginning to really create code, but right now we are using AI to really take an action using agents. So one simple use case is we are trying to use voice AI and really use the low-hanging fruit of transferring phone calls and taking away our human operators. But that requires data from my EHR. That requires also data which is in my on-call system in order to transfer data to the right place. So previously, all this data was sitting in so many different sheets of paper and also different systems, which required us to consolidate them into one place and connect my on-call schedule to also the list of patients that we have in our EHR. So it showed pretty much if you solve the data problem, after that, I think what we can build on top of that is when there's multiple things. And we are starting with very low risky, less risky ones, where it is very hard to find people in those areas. So we are doing very intentionally, where we are not really taking any human jobs away, but we are also adding a lot of value and automating.
Yeah, I love that both of you have answered the importance of data, and I'm also hearing that even within Innovaccer, our goal is to how do we move from a system of record to a system of intelligence, which is obviously born from having the right data at the right time. So love those answers, Mike. Would love your perspective on overall from a CIO career, obviously sitting within Innovaccer, seeing most of our clients. Where do you think people are stuck between pilots to production and going at scale today?
So I kind of echo a lot of the points that Ravi just made. I think right now, so a lot of our pilots are going to production because we're staying in safe use cases around incredibly um, burdensome tasks, administrative tasks. Perhaps it's a little bit of kind of paving cow paths that the process isn't perfect, but we're going to put AI to work on it and fix it. And so I think many of our customers and our clients are leaning forward on those particular use cases. And I think we're seeing success. I think the jury's still out on whether it's that work was worth efforts in some areas, in some domains, but certainly we're seeing wins in particular areas. And I know, Smriti, you're familiar with our prior auth solution. It's finding 10x speed up in that whole process and efficiencies in that process. So, there's certainly winners showing up. I think folks are kind of being, they cut the rope if they find something's not going to be there, and plenty of the use cases aren't paying off. But I think all of this experimentation and move in these administrative areas are setting us up for the big bang. Because I think what we're learning, and this is a point that Ravi just made, is there's going to be another go around on getting that data right. And so as we start getting into, health outcomes, into things that have to do with clinical decisions, we're going to want to take another round at cleaning up that data so that we can go after the big one, which is patient outcomes and better healthy situations for our consumers.
No, I think I love that all of you are aligned on low risk, high impact use cases and ensuring productivity, efficiency, and obviously revenue savings are some of the levers. I'm curious, everyone says they have data, which is still for debates. I think Ravi, Kalyani, and Michael align. But yet, most AI initiatives are struggling in the market when they encounter real world workflows. So maybe, Ravi, we'll start with you. Would love to understand, where do you see are the blockers? Where do you think we can truly unlock as a healthcare system on that end?
I mean, my take is truly it is not a technology problem. It is truly we have to further refine our implementation strategy. And what I see more and more is we have AI, but it does require the teams who are implementing it closely connected with the people who know the technology. So what I see is there's a lot of talk about where AI failed, but even when we looked at the use cases that worked, the technology was not the problem. Really, the implementation was the differentiator. So what I, at least in my experience, noticing is we need the SMEs closely connected and add an additional data layer, which is what the context is, which is where I think the theme of this conference is. We need to be still able to further store or define to our agents better ability to understand the context and still I think take that action. So we have all the tools, MCP tools needed, but we still need to further implement well to have the better success rate. So that's where we have to further refine the data, but also improve our implementation strategy.
Yeah, it's nice you mentioned that, because I think, I work very closely, obviously, with an Innovaccer with our forward deployed engineers. And I think what we found very, very meaningful, to your point, Ravi, is like, one is obviously having the tools and the platform and the capabilities, but how do we have the SMEs and the people who are working boots on the ground to truly understand the end-to-end workflow along with the anticipated ROI, and then work that very closely with our clients, has kept the formation very tight, but also keeps accountability and trust very much in sync along with expectations as well. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's very key, because there's enough tools in the market, enough AI buzz, but I think to really execute successfully, that combination is kind of the unlocking feature. Kalyani, we would love your insights on this as well, and the mic.
Um, I heard Mike say about the data, and I read somewhere that 96% of healthcare data doesn't get used.
Hmm.
We only are tapping into about 4%. We've collected and collected data in all aspects. There are dimensions of data that we don't even know. It's a gold mine in some respect, or it's like a mountain that we are not able to get past. So I believe that we are where the innovation really should happen is at the point of delivery. We can go back and get a second go around in fixing the data. We can go around working with the technology and finessing the technology till 2030, and it still won't make a difference, because where the rubber meets the road is when that patient comes to the room and has diabetes, has asthma, hasn't taken their medication. It doesn't matter what Copilot says. It doesn't matter what ChatGPT says. At that moment, what that clinician says to that patient and the training that the clinician has had is really what's making the difference. Because let's face it, we're all in the business of not health IT, not AI. We're in the business of healthcare. So I believe that it's really going back to the basic. We start at the end point, where the patient is, where the patient is needing the care, and how to make that happen the best way. So I'm actually going the reverse.
I love the reverse engineering. I think that is true. I think sometimes when we start doing things, we forget the end goal, and then, when we don't really reach there. But I think it is truly important that we are in the business of care, and so we do have to start there and work backwards on how we create and on what we create. Mike, would love your insights on this as well.
This is a good thing about being third on these is I agree with Kalyani on this too. A little bit, some of the details on it is when that clinician, whether it's a physician or an attending nurse or whatever it may be, getting the right information to them, in the IT world, we call this operationalizing the information. How do you get to them when it makes sense? And we know they're not going to be walking around with their cell phone in their hand or another portal. Those, we've proven portal technology is, kind of great, but it doesn't really work in an operational setting. So I think some of the complexities that we have to deal with, what is that right delivery mechanism? I was in one of my prior jobs, we went through and did a very, what I considered, worked with Oxford University, did a complex AI type solution, and it improved, one of the key parameters in our emergency rooms by 3%. But we never deployed it because we couldn't find a way to get it into that ER so the people working in those situations could actually take advantage of that situation. So how we manage that in a real life situation has to evolve as we're moving with different AI type techniques. And then kind of the data side of that, related to that, who then becomes the system of record? How do we get this information back to the EMR? So clearly it needs to be the place where the record is kept, but now the system of record? Is it the gold record, or is it in another application? And that's, some complex data management strategy that needs to be worked out as we evolve this. I'm not saying we wait till we figure this out, because that would be too long, because we've been working for 2 decades to try to get this resolved. But I think these are some complexities that need to be resolved as we keep moving forward with these AI tooling.
Absolutely. And, as you all know, the conference is called Context because as Innovaccer, we have kind of honed in on the art of data and doing this just within the healthcare vertical for more than 10 plus years. And we find that very important, especially when deploying AI, because the healthcare context matters. So I think back to you, Ravi, would love your intel and understanding. Organizations, especially Capital Health in this case, when they're deploying AI, how do they take a stand on the context that is missing, right? Because when you don't have the deep healthcare context, obviously the accuracy and the performance of AI can be a little, not so perfect, I'll call it.
Yeah, what I'm noticing is truly it requires very intentional way of building the data for AI, because most of this context, because what we are trying to do with AI is truly help the humans, which most of the time the context is in their head. The context is not in the databases that we store. So without really intentionally creating that context and having AI have a way of getting it, it will still fail. It is only as good as how well it can understand the context. We as humans, natively based upon the job role we have, we sat in that role, we kind of trained for that role, we know what the context is because of all the additional ways of we understanding it. But if we don't provide that, I think AI is not going to be effective. So in our case, we are trying to build that context. In some cases, it doesn't exist. That's why we are creating it, and especially defining as much as possible to those AI agents and feeding it and creating it based upon the role it is going to play. Yeah. So right now, I don't see it always exist, but the further we define it and then we either give it based upon the role we are having AI play it, but sometimes you might be able to derive it based upon the use case.
That makes sense. Mike, I want to pass the ball to you. Would love, your deeper insight on how does one build that context in a very meaningful, stage, I think where Ravi is, and then how do you drive change from there to obviously get to the scale of AI?
Yeah, I think, I worked for a very large health system, and to define, does Kaiser Permanente have a single medical context? So I would say, 10 years ago, the answer really was no. I mean, we had different EMRs with different workflows, different healthcare protocols, different medical groups with different processes and procedures. So an AI routine, no matter how clever it is, can't come up with a single context to do that. So I think there's a part of that has to be, and by the way, AI is smart enough to figure it out, but when that, like Ravi said, when it's random in someone's head and standard in one organization and not standard in another organization, it takes a lot of time to figure that out, because in some cases it may not be the right answer because of the two healthcare protocols disagree with each other. So my feeling is, and heaven forbid that we think we can apply AI to all the healthcare systems in the country, is impossible, because all of them are differentiating themselves on different healthcare protocols. So to me, we have to start with like standardizing these types of things. Like for example, we've run into cases where when you're in a cardiology information domain, they only accept blood pressure. In some systems, they only accept blood pressure that was taken by a certified cardiac clinician. And so we have to discount all the other blood pressure readings, even if they're more current. While some other systems, they don't do that. And so how does the AI figure out those differences? That's where all these different semantics come in. And it's not an unsolvable problem, but I do think some of it starts with getting some common care mechanisms. Like, the American Heart Association's done a very good job, in my unlearned opinion, around healthcare, but around cardiac rehabilitation. I think there's general agreement around that, and I think that's a great use case for AI, because it is a consistent protocol that people are applying across the system. So AI can learn, can improve, and it's a great use case for that. But the others are somewhat still wide open, I think. Hopefully I didn't go too much into the details there, Smriti.
No. I think we are all grounding on, I think data needs discipline, and I'm personally a big believer that discipline gives freedom, and I think that's where we are able to expand in terms of AI and autonomy. But Kalyani, would love your 2 cents on the same topic.
Yeah, so this it's my turn to go third, Mike. And I was actually waiting for one of you to say the term "garbage in, garbage out," because in every session that you go into, everybody talks about it, and it really is. I think it sounds like a cliche. It is a cliche, but it is one of those cliches that's so. It rings so true to everybody. And with AI, you think it can solve a lot of problems, but it's not going to solve it entirely. And a great example is actually, I'll go back one. I think the future of healthcare and AI is really going to be embedded within data governance. And I think we talk about AI, we talk about outcomes, we talk about the different use cases, but the underpinning of all of this is really going to be the data governance. And a great example of that, you were talking about the cardiology. There are, in the industry and in most health systems, there are at least three different definitions of readmissions. Right, there is a 30-day readmission. There's 30-day HEDIS readmission. There's 30-day, readmission from the CMS side, and there's so many different ways to define one thing, and that's such a core thing to our business if you're thinking about it as healthcare. So, I think ideally we solve for a lot of these different contextual problems. Some of which is just making us doing things just to make it more complicated. I can see how you'd have a difference for a cardiologist who wants to get a very precise measurement by another cardiologist. But I really think that having four different definitions of 30-day readmission is really inexcusable. Right? We've somehow gone wrong in the industry that we have that many different things. So I think somehow we've got to keep, as we talk about AI, as we talk about technology, really as we talk about anything in healthcare, we've got to keep data governance as the key to what we do next. So I really am going to pivot to those people, because they're going to be my best friends.
Yeah, I think I love that all of us are aligned on one. We're trying to make healthcare simple. Seems to be very complicated, but starts with standardized data management. Obviously, the unification of data, having this one source of truth. I think we have different sources of truth and different sense of reality, which is what I think we're all collectively trying to address. But Kalani, I think you gave us good segue to the next section, which is on governance and trust. I think we all know that healthcare moves in the speed of trust, and so healthcare is fairly far behind other industries when it comes to AI. And as AI moves from making recommendations to taking actions, how does governance need to evolve? Kalyani, maybe I'll start with you here.
Really, I think governance has been something everybody's talked about it, everybody recognizes it. No one has ever said this is not something I want to do in my organization. Every CEO, and this has been for not just now, for the past 10 years, we've all talked about it, more than 10 years. I think what really needs to change is, again, us just putting our going beyond the words and really making it count. And one of the ways that I really like our the way our CAO approaches it, and say, let's start with the things that matter the most. We're not going to be able to solve everything. Like I said, there's so much data and so much need for governance in healthcare. There's so many different languages that we're all speaking within the healthcare system. Let's start with the basics. Let's get like five things right across the system. Let's get five things right. Let's use those five things and then pivot on to the next one. And I think this is really where we need to go. And it should start not just top down or bottom up. It should just be pervasive. And everybody should be talking about it. Everybody should be understanding that it's everyone's role. I think we kind of did ourselves a disservice by making one data steward, one data owner. I think that in itself is really we gave the responsibility to one person. Most of the time, that person didn't know what they were responsible for, and just because they said readmission one time in a meeting, dumb. You're it. You're the owner of the readmission metrics, and this is it. You're going to have to learn everything about it. But I really think it should be a conversation we have almost all the time. We do this a lot for information security, but for some reason we don't do it a lot for information governance. And I think that's something we really need to get into. Just everybody. If there's one lesson people learn in AI, it's that you start with governance.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think, I often think about what does responsibility mean, right? An individual responsibility is also collective public responsibility, and that's how we definitely view this, right? It's to your point, there cannot just be like one data store. Like everyone on the team should care about equal standards, proper data, proper outcomes, right? Like one person goes down, the entire team goes down, all right? The ripple effect is the same. So it's not a one person show. So I love that you mentioned that. Ravi, would love your insight on how are you actually creating a framework for governance and trust, right? Because I think from Innovaccer seat, we do obviously a very rigorous framework on evaluation, auditability, creating glass box model, and most definitely having clinical committees and obviously having the right people in the right time to oversight every function of AI. But I love your kind of transparent take on like how have you structured this within Capital Health, and then how do you try to scale this as you have more AI use cases?
So we stood up AI governance earlier this year, and we have representation from, it's not big, but it's decently represented by multiple parties. And in our case, risk and compliance is part of it, while data analytics or data engineering and all the operations team who are using AI are represented. And we started most of our pilots for AI where it is smaller, but a human review, and we can implement the governance and audit process and learn from it. But what we are learning is it's not scalable, as we are doing this more and more and expand this to hundreds of people. So we paused, and then at least scaling this to hundreds of docs. And we now created a technology framework which we can replicate whatever the humans are doing, whether it is HIM auditing when physicians are using AI to write their notes, or a risk or a compliance team is auditing to make sure certain components when we are passing into AI, and the output, they are reviewing those components. So we are now creating funny enough, an AI agent to do the same work that our compliance and HIM do, but flag it for human in the loop review. So we had took what humans are doing in a small pilot with five, and now we are before giving it to 500 dogs, we are again putting technology to flag, and then still have our audit and compliance risk team have the tools to feel comfortable that we are doing it in a more controlled fashion.
Yeah. I think you're
So
touching on a few points, Ravi. For me, you're touching on a few points on the importance of change management, having a fuller circle buy-in on how you're operating this with the tech framework and obviously a governance framework with human in the loop. I think that's very important, especially for going from pilots to production to scaling in a very reasonable, accountable format. I think we are all aligned on how we're doing that. With Mike, I want to check in with you, like from an innovative standpoint, when working with clients. You both are, we both are tag teaming across the board, but where would you say we're seeing the most caution for AI and like the least caution? I think we are primarily focusing on obviously administrative operational use cases, right? Like high impact, low risk. But if you had to go deeper on this topic, like how, what would your findings be?
So I think, on the kind of, I've already mentioned kind of most of our clients, almost everybody is experimenting, moving, and again, those kind of the high value, highly burdensome administrative type roles. And the other one too is back kind of on the governance thing. They're taking a long view on governance. There's a few customers that says, well, I'm not going to start doing AI until I get the governance in place. Well, my opinion is getting the governance, which is the policy, the process, and the organization together. That's a decade-long problem, and you're never going to get it right just starting. And so, just to me, admitting it's going to morph and move and change, I think, is the right thing to do. Now, having said that, we have some people that are so cautious, they are not they're going to wait until the governance or at least the policies get built. And in fact, we've had instances with Innovaccer where the legal departments have come back and said, we don't understand AI. We don't think we like it. We want to know everywhere in your code, in your system, where do you use AI? Well, I mean, that's a loaded question. I don't even know if I can define AI. I mean, someone say an if then else statement, it used to be AI when we used to call them expert systems. And then now if you're using some service, in some SaaS situation, we don't even know perhaps what AI is being used beneath that. So I do feel that is super important when we start getting into the clinical business. I don't think now where we are in the state of things, at least majority of our customers, is that's necessary. Certainly governance has to evolve, and we probably shouldn't get over our skis until we get a lot of the basic, get master data taken care of, now. Get reference data taken care of now. Those other things are going to come later, as we mentioned, data stewards. At Kaiser Permanente, I had 17 information domains that we'd defined. I couldn't fund a steward for every one of those domains. A lot of it is not everybody appreciates the value of data, and that's worth that investment. But that's the reality of being in an enterprise. So I think that's a lot of randomness. But let things march on. Don't let governance fall off your insight of where things are going.
Love this answers. I think go ahead, Kalyani. Yep.
I was going to just clarify one thing on there. Earlier when I was talking about data governance. There's a huge difference between AI governance and data governance, and obviously I know this team would definitely know that. But it's worth mentioning and clarifying, because people often mistake, oh, I have an AI governance policy. We had ChatGPT write it, and it seems fine. Everything is great. It's written everything in it, and I think we're good. But and you'd be surprised how many people have that. I think information governance is its own pillar. It's its own vertical, if you may. And that, while we have an AI governance policy that has to evolve, an information governance policy has to be deep rooted. I think that's where the difference should be. So I just wanted to clarify that for those who think you have an AI governance policy and you put it in place and you think you're done, you're not done.
I love the reality check. So thanks, Kalyani, on that one. We have a couple of questions from the public. I think the first one is, what are the early signs a pilot is quietly becoming another orphan instead of something that scales? Great question. Ravi, do you want to give your quick insights on that?
I think what for me, I think we kind of started such a way that we know the end goal and then continue to build our pilots. That way, it can scale big. If we, for me, I think a sign is we lose the engagement of our operations, and they are not seeing the value, and it becomes an orphan project. So I would say we probably need more engagement and continuous storytelling of what the value it is bringing. Yeah, if you lose engagement from operations, I would say, yeah, it won't go anywhere.
Kalyani, your thoughts?
I like the way the question is phrased, because it's not talking about the success of the pilot at all. They're just talking about the engagement. So the pilot could be completely successful, but it can still be an orphan. And it, at the same time, there may be like, a marginal success in a pilot, and then it just hits. So I think this is really just following the early adopters and the scalers as much as possible. And an early sign in that is, like, I agree with Ravi, that it's really about people who are in the room with you. When you start seeing that dwindling meeting room, I know it's gone. And it really has to come from the adopters. It has to come from the business people. If you have more analysts than the people in the business who are using it in the room, again, it's gone. I think it really, really should be there. But that's not to say that it's gone forever. It's just, it can always, the orphans can, anytime be adopted, and so it can really come back and have its own world. But I would really measure it not so much as whether or not it's getting adopted. I would try to scale up, or try to fail fast or learn fast, and keep as many orphans as possible. Keep it on your bookshelf. Keep it in your home. Keep them in your home. Take care of them. They're really worth it, and someday they will bear fruit. They will be your best children. So I'm all for having as many of those as possible.
Yeah, I think I love that you mentioned that. I think there's nurturing, there's engagement, there's change management, training of usage. I think within this panel are obviously everyone in tech and AI. Maybe it's easier for us, right? One of my friend mentioned to me, you may have played a piano for 30 years, but you may no longer have relevance for the other person who's just touching the piano for the first time because you're so used to doing what you're doing, right? So it's almost important for all of us to go back to that state zero, think about what it takes to first think about what is AI, what does the training take, especially for, say, care managers and physicians who are not even in the business of tech, right? They're patient in the business of taking care of people. So fully aligned. This brings us to we have got like 6 minutes left, but this brings us to the most important question. Like, how do we define ROI? And we're talking about some use cases, but maybe Kalyani will start with you. In order to scale at an enterprise level, right? And I want to redefine and ground us on the context of what we think about enterprise is like starting from one vertical to the other. It's not just a collection of use cases, but it's a complete transformation from a before state to an after state, which has clear levers, which could be productivity, efficiency, capacity management, revenue savings, right? So when you hone in on those levers and think about enterprise value generation, how does that look like for you?
So this is a great question within healthcare itself, because we in healthcare talk about ROI on a yearly basis. Everybody wants to know what's your in-year value, what's your 2027 value, and really that is where we are right now. Healthcare is long term. You don't stop being diabetic in 1 year or in a year and a half. That said, I think that there really has to be a more tangible and real time way to test the ROI, especially on AI, because it will be important to be able to scale it as fast as possible. So, is there a model that's readily available? I think there are plenty, but then it has to be fast moving and real time. That's the metric that I would use for any ROI model right now.
Interesting. Ravi?
I think what I am seeing with AI, there are few things that we can measure in a using numbers, but more importantly, I see AI will, especially in healthcare, will let us be, I think, spend more time with, have that more human connection with the patients and give us time back. Always, it might not translate to dollar saving, but I think more uh, ability, I think, for the clinicians to feel happier and more um, happier in their job rather than burnout since COVID we had. So that's one way to measure. And in some cases, yes, we'll have a hard ROI, but in most cases, I feel like I think we had to measure using the job satisfaction or whatever metric, because most of the people, there's more demand in healthcare than less supply.
Hmm.
So I don't know if dollar value will be the case, but mostly we all can feel good about the role we play in healthcare if we
Absolutely. I
incorporate
think, yeah, especially for physicians, I completely agree, Ravi. Like, we want happy, healthy physicians and not physicians who are burnt out because by 2050, I think most of us will be about the age of 65, which is a lot. So we would need way more support, much more capacity, and whatnot. But, Mike, I'm going to start with you on the last round. If there was a blank check given to you and said, Mike, implement one thing in AI for healthcare, what would that be?
So, so I would go for the long game. I'm very um, bullish on the ability to model the human being and the patient through technology. People call it like digital twins, and I don't think it's going to show an ROI. I don't think a lot of people will understand it, but truly, if you want to swing for the fence in AI, it's kind of redefine the way we've done evidence-based medicine. I know this is like all crazy, but this is, I think, I would swing for the big one on this because AI is prolific.
Awesome. Very, very, very progressive. Ravi?
I would say truly healthcare over a period of time has started from really doctor being able to even visit the patients at home to now it's such huge and humongous and complex. I would completely automate the administrative portion of it. That way we enjoy the clinical portion of it. So that would be my way of doing it. Yeah.
Love the dreams and the hopes. Kalyani?
I'm going to stay more pragmatic. If I had a blank check and a wand, I'd say training, data literacy across the board. I would say training, the upskilling the people that are working in the analytics side, upskilling the people to be able to use AI in the way that it's coming. We're developing it faster than we can even understand it. It's going at the speed of light, and we aren't even able to comprehend how to use it, let alone tell people how to make use of it. So if I had one wand, I would say training, upskilling, and data literacy.
I love that. I think if I had a blank check, I would make all your three wishes come true. But this brings us to the end of our session. Thank you all for listening. There is a code on this bar. I think this was just the beginning of a journey in AI. So thank you, Ravi, Kalyani, and Mike, for your very intellectual and emotional insights and intel. But that'll be it from Innovaccer today. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Smriti. That was great.
Thank you.